Hi, I'm Rhi. I'm your Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health Officer from the Student Union. I'm part of the exec team and I'm here with a lot of senior leadership to discuss all things sustainability, social responsibility and EDI. So if we just introduce ourselves just to let everyone know who we are. So let's start here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Julian. I'm the Executive Director for Social Responsibility and Civic Engagement.
Hi, I'm Julia Durkan. I am Head of Environmental Sustainability.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fox. I'm Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion.
Hi, I'm Nalin, Thakkar, Vice President for Social Responsibility, but I look after one or two other things too.
Brilliant. Okay, so I guess to kick off, might just start with just a thing that these are all questions submitted by students. So this is really what students want to know. So I think we should start off with this one question discussing social responsibility as a whole. So it's been said that it's a core goal for the entire institution, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Shall I take that then?
Yes.
So, can I start with an anecdote? So, I was at a SDG meeting in Sydney a few weeks ago, and they said, how do we sort of embed this in a university? And I was part of the panel, and I started by saying, we've been doing SDGs since 1824.
Just to confirm, what does SDG mean?
Sustainable Development Goals,
Brilliant.
which is how we measure our impact. So they were talking about how do we embed this in a university, teaching, research and so on. And I started by saying, well, actually, we don't need to, because we've been doing that since 1824. And what I mean by that is we are the first civic university in this country. And civic universities were set up for societal benefit. So social responsibility is at the heart of everything we do. So when we say it's a core goal, that's what we mean, that we exist for societal benefit. Now, we did have it as a separate goal equal to research and teaching and learning. And the reason for that was to give it the headline that it needed, to sort of revitalize that area, to think about sort of embedding it right across everything we do. And so from 2011 till this year, we had it as a core goal, but it is now firmly embedded in what we do. And we think it rightly sits now as a foundational value for the university. And it's a foundation on which our research is built, our innovation is built, our teaching and learning is built, our operations are built. So when we say it's a core goal, it means that we impact through everything we do. We have a societal benefit through everything we do. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Julian.
It's a nice analogy maybe of before. Think of it as three pillars we used to have holding up a building, separate: research, teaching, social responsibility. By saying it's now a foundation, it literally sits on top of which the university is built. So our research is built on top of that foundation. Our teaching is built on top of that foundation. Our EDI work, our environmental sustainability work, is built on top of that foundation. So it sits at the heart of the institution, and that's where we've moved it in our new strategy, which is a really exciting place to be. And we couldn't be in that position, I don't think, without the progress we made over the past 15 years. You're becoming a university. When we first launched this, people were asking, what does social responsibility mean? To now being, Europe's leading university, 3 years running for this, second in the whole world for our impact. So it's something I know our students are really proud of. It's one of the reasons lots of our students tell me they choose to come and study at this university, because of that broader impact. Of course, people want to come here to get their own education, but I think we're increasingly seeing young people like yourselves say to us that we want to go somewhere that has those sorts of values, has that purpose beneath it. And that's what social responsibility is. It's that purpose-led agenda, making higher education a positive force in the world.
Okay, so what does that now mean then for students in practice? How do we put this into sort of tangible things that students can see?
So I have a go now. Yeah, I think, and again, we're trying to really, this analogy of making it foundational, I'll come to in a moment, because it's a really exciting opportunity for us. But to date, I'd say where the students have been getting involved in social responsibility, well, through things like in the Students' Union, the student action, student volunteering, raising and giving. There's some amazing work that our students are doing, which is so highly valued by local communities, but also global communities. Students get involved in things locally, nationally, and internationally. And we had the Stellified program, which was a more formal way of capturing some of that work, plus other things like ethical grant challenges and leadership opportunities into an award that we developed for students. Now, where we're trying to move from to reflect this idea of SR being foundational in the future is trying to ensure that regardless of what you study, every student in the future will get an opportunity to work with external partners as part of their degree. We're calling this partner-enabled learning. And some people call it service learning. That's an element of it. And what that really means is whether you're studying for a history degree or whether you're doing neuroscience or whether you're studying dentistry or you're studying social anthropology, is there something you can do as part of that degree that not just benefits you in terms of getting an excellent qualification, but at the same time allows you to work with an external partner to make an impact? So it might be a history student doing their dissertation, not on a topic that just they chose, but maybe choosing that topic in partnership with a local heritage group so that that knowledge benefits them. That, I think, makes that learning more enjoyable. Students tell us they want to do this. So they're more satisfied, but also I think it makes them more employable as well. When that history student comes to graduate, they can talk about that project they've done. So as well as benefiting society, of course, I think it also benefits that individual student. So that's a really exciting thing that we've got in the strategy. It's going to take us a number of years to implement this across the university of our size, but that really excites me, and it really excites our students as well when we start to think about the possibilities.
Can I add to that as well? So one way we're doing that already is through our University Living Lab. So students are doing assessments, so why not do something that's going to make a difference? So instead of it sitting on a shelf and not being used, the University Living Lab has over sort of 150 different research questions set by external organisations. So, you know, genuinely things that they need to do in order to address sustainable development. So students can take that, then shape it into their existing coursework or dissertation. So it really has a meaningful impact. So an example would be through your module, you might be asked to evaluate a sustainable development initiative. And we actually have a question from the Bangladesh Education Trust around exactly that. So you're doing your academic work, but you're shaping it around a real world problem. And then it gets marked through the existing process. And then if you score over 65%, that work then goes to that external organisation, and students are then told about the difference that it makes. And as Julian mentioned, we know that some of the students have gone on to get jobs with those external organisations, and also it can add and make you stand out in your CVs and when you're applying for jobs as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And actually, we have had some questions about the University Living Lab. Is this something that most students you're aiming to be able to get them all involved in, or is this currently functioning only to a certain amount?
So it's open to any student to participate. And I think as Julian alluded to, the idea is to expand that partner-enabled learning so that all students will then have an opportunity to participate in different ways. And one of those ways will be through the University Living Lab.
Yeah, that's for projects, but there'll be other ways. So for example, we know in health sciences in your faculty, we've got students who want to go out and, for example, as well as training to be a pharmacist, how to triage people, take their blood pressure, do a prick test for kind of cholesterol and things. These are really things that benefit society, of course, but also benefits those students' skills. So sometimes it's a project like a living lab. Sometimes it's something practical. For some students in engineering, we know that they'll be interested in companies coming in and giving them challenges they can work on in teams on the day they're live, and the winning project might end up getting a chance to present that to the board of that company. And so it depends on the subject area in question, but definitely living labs and project-based partner-enabled learning, I think that's going to be one of the ways in which we'll be able to deliver this.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Okay, so I think now we're going to go more down through some of the EDI questions, Sarah. We've had a question actually talking about what concrete steps are being taken to diversify senior leadership and not just entry-level or student-facing roles, as I do think it is kind of apparent in a lot of higher leadership teams in the university that there are a certain demographic that is more prevalent than others.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And, you know, I would say that within EDI, like how we really measure success is through representation. Like the efforts that we make in EDI must impact representation of in our student body, of our colleagues more broadly, and particularly at leadership levels. So that is the kind of the big goal within EDI, essentially, is to diversify leadership. And in a way, everything we do in EDI contributes to that ultimate goal. But I think there's I would say 3 key, like really concrete things that we are looking at to diversify leadership. And the first is that you have to set goals. Like, leadership diversity and equity more broadly doesn't change without conscious intention. So setting goals is super important, and we have goals. We have goals at leadership level for well, actually, we've got goals right through the kind of employee chain, but at professor level and at kind of senior professional services level, we have specific goals. And progress on that is slow, but we are actually moving forward positively towards those goals. So kind of over the last 4 years, when we formed our most recent EDI strategy, we have made year-on-year progress in diversifying leadership. And I think people actually aren't that aware of that. And it's kind of important to point out that, yeah, we have made real progress in diversifying leadership. So that's the first thing, to set goals. The second thing I think that we're really focused on is the promotions process. So I think there's been feedback. I mean, I've been here a year, so a lot of this feedback is kind of prior to my joining, but I've been struck since I joined that people can often feel that's quite an opaque process. So we've done a lot of work to kind of make that process more accessible, more transparent, and implement things like mentoring and workshops to help people navigate that process. And actually a range of like supporting interventions. So we have a whole suite of targeted leadership development programs. So those are for specific staff groups like Black, Asian and minoritized ethnic future leaders, female future leaders, disabled future leaders, LGBT future leaders. So those are like development interventions to support people to accelerate into leadership positions. And a bit tangential, but those programs in themselves, like they cause a bit of, they spark debate, and people are kind of often have conflicting views about whether we should have specific leadership programs for, say, women or for disabled employees. Actually, I think at this point in time, they're really important. It's really important for people who have a similar identity and similar experience to be able to come together in a space and explore together what it actually means to be a female leader or a disabled leader or a Black leader in an organisation that ultimately, like all organisations, particularly historic ones, were built with those populations in mind. So those leadership development interventions are a really important part of supporting that promotions process. And I've been in post for a year, and I have had the opportunity to sit on some promotions panels just as an observer. And, we really do scrutinise diversity in that process. So that's kind of been really heartening to see. And then, the third thing, which is really important, is inclusive hiring.
Yeah.
So, there's really good work, I think, going on in teams and faculties and schools around the university on inclusive hiring. And it really has had an impact. Like, if you actually look at the numbers, we have diversified our intake of colleagues at all levels over the last 4 years. And what we want to do next really is create a really good centralised inclusive recruitment approach for the whole university. So the activity isn't necessarily happening in pockets, but that we have a real kind of university approach to inclusive hiring. And I've recently done a kind of consultation to create a 10-year EDI framework that's going to mirror Manchester 2035. And one of the kind of real insights that has come out of that is that there is this inconsistency in EDI. So that's a kind of real goal for us now in the next 3 years to build our own kind of, I guess, talent acquisition team centrally for the university and to embed inclusion through that as in its build. And that's so fundamental. That team is just being built. It's just being formed. It's really exciting. Like, we are really going to be taking ownership and responsibility for our own recruitment processes in a way we haven't done before. We, have relied heavily on lots of different methods. And we on the EDI Directorate have the opportunity to partner with that team and really weave inclusion into the very build of that team. I think that's super important. So yeah, those are the 3 things. I think goals, kind of promotions and development, and inclusive hiring.
Yeah, so just sort of picking up on what you were talking about, I also wanted to highlight an aspect of university culture and what does this actually mean for changing that when we're looking at students, for example, who are at the very sort of beginning of their academic journey. There's a lot of sort of differences going on that sometimes may be a hindrance in students being able to progress and be retained by the university and feel like they can actually like achieve the same sort of level of goals as their sort of like whiter counterparts. So I'm sort of more discussing the unexplained awarding gap that is particularly present in Black heritage students. What do you think about that sort of pipeline?
Yeah, Nalin, did you want to say something about that?
I think this is not just a higher education issue. It's a wider societal issue, and we see that reflected in employment and all areas in society. That certain groups are marginalized, are not able to progress as they should. And that is being reflected in the university, and we must tackle that. It cannot be right. When we take people into university, they presumably come with a certain level of attainment already. So you have people starting at the same level, and then certain groups get left behind during the university. That's not the students' fault. That's something we are doing. That's wrong. And we have to get it right. It may be unintentional, it may be cultural, but it is something we have to get it right. And it's traditionally we've sort of separated out awarding gaps as separate from sort of the rest of the EDI agenda. And one of the things we are doing is talking to our new Vice President for Teaching and Learning and saying this is all part and parcel of the same issue, and that we should deal with it as a single problem, and therefore she now is member of the EDI committee, where we can discuss these things, where we can collectively work towards saying, well, what is happening here? What is it that we are doing? That means that people who come in with equal level of attainment are falling behind. So, but we do need to tackle it.
Yeah. I do find it interesting though that you said that students start off at an equal level of attainment, because I would argue otherwise. I would argue that students come in and they're already at imbalanced level depending on sort of their backgrounds, sort of financial status beforehand. So do you think that is encompassed in this?
No, what I meant was they're coming at the same level of academic ability.
Okay, brilliant.
Because we set minimum grades for people to come in. If you come in with the same level of grades,
okay, cool,
your academic ability is the same. But then we're not taking account of all the other things that you're saying. That means that they're falling behind here, and we're not able to support them. But I think we mustn't get into this deficit model that there is something wrong with these students. There's something wrong with us in that we are not able to sort of recognize, or we're missing that we're not able to sort of allow these students to reach their full potential, because clearly we're missing that.
And I think it loops back around to your original question was about diversity at leadership. And it's why it's so fundamentally important to have a representative and diverse leadership, because those leaders, they set curriculum and they make decisions about teaching and learning and, our activities in research. So like having that kind of diverse representation at leadership is so important to creating the conditions for diversity to excel through the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I guess my next question, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say that this has been quite a big sentiment, I think, from a lot of students. We all know AI is a very confusing thing that is happening now that a lot of students are unsure about. But there's also been some questions about how the university is sort of representing AI, i.e. there's been a lot of marketing around campus via Instagram, for example, promoting AI. We've also had a lot of people coming in on campus promoting like things like Google AI, all of these things to students. And what students are arguing is subsequently ignoring AI's actual environmental impact and the degradation it has on the environment. Does this not oppose sustainability values when we are highly promoting AI now, especially with a lot of processes and stuff in the uni?
Yeah, sure. So again, great question. And I think it's a question that lots of us are asking, including me. We're obviously at this sort of precipice of this incredible digital revolution, but what at expense of the environment? So we know that sort of large language models and high performance computing use significant amounts of energy and also water for cooling. So we can't ignore the environmental impacts of that. So firstly, I think that Manchester 2035, the new strategic plan, really kind of highlights our commitment to using responsible AI or responsible use of AI within that, both within our sort of foundation, being values-led and socially responsible, but also through the leap around digital inside and out. So using AI ethically, using it responsibly, and embedding sustainability into both the digital and that physical infrastructure. So we have identified a bit of a gap in that area, and we've just recently created a new AI environmental sustainability working group to work with the broader AI strategy groups to try and embed sustainability within that level of sort of decision making. So their focus is very much around providing that expertise and advice, assessing the impacts of AI, and then looking at developing guidelines around responsible and sustainable AI practice. And then I think there's a lot of discussion and debate around this as well on campus. So recently, a couple of weeks ago, there was an event about sustainable research in the digital sort of arena. And in fact, this week, there was also discussion about generative AI and the ethical and environmental sustainability implications of that. So there are lots of opportunities, I think, for the wider community to get involved in those discussions and really work out what it is that we want to do together and create that sort of collectively and collaboratively about what does responsible AI use mean for us and everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And how will students be able to sort of feed into this discussion?
Yeah, so I think basically it's open to everybody, and being able to share those things that are happening and getting those voices round the table is definitely something that we need to do. And then, you through the sort of AI ES working group as well, and having those voices represented is really important.
Brilliant.
I think it's important to recognize that the genie's out of the bottle. AI is going to be prevalent in workplace and so on. So we cannot ignore it. We do have to have our students using it. We do have to teach our students to use it well, because they'll be expected to do that in a workplace.
Okay.
So then it boils down to how do we responsibly sort of use it. So if we think about when we put an inquiry through a large language model, it causes each inquiry, I think it's about 30 grams of CO2 emission or something like that. But large part of the emissions are due to when you're training a large language model. And when you put an inquiry, it's the host, whoever is providing that AI service, that's where the emissions are occurring. And what you have to then do is source your partners, which are trying to do something good in that area. So if you take certain AI providers are doing a lot in environmental sustainability space, others are doing very little. So some are moving towards having a completely renewable sort of energy source for all their AI work. which would then make it much more environmentally friendly. So I think we just need to be mindful that we don't just say, oh, well, shut AI out of here, because we can't. Our students need it because that's what's going to be required in a workplace.
Yeah.
But it's about how we then work in a way that is environmentally sustainable or environmentally friendly. So are we working with the right partners? Are we championing with the partners we want to work with? Are we questioning them as stakeholders, saying, what are you doing in this area? So I think it's really important that we're mindful of that.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of, okay, so you're teaching students how to use it in certain situations, but what about the level of should students be using it for things that were traditionally done without AI, such as writing essays, doing research, for example, that sort of thing, and also on the staff side as well. Are staff being encouraged to use it when setting exams, for example? Where is the line between this, and how is this going to be guided?
A lot of this is new, but there will have to be development of responsible AI use. And there is a code of practice that the university has on use of AI.
Okay.
I would say we are delusional if we think students are not already using AI, large language models, for planning their essays and so on. So the issue for us is how to teach them to use it responsibly, but also how to use it well. So one of the most important things about use of AI is not to just blindly put questions in there. It's just to have the right sort of prompts in there to sort of make it give you the right level of information. And we mustn't get to this idea that you can't just use it and please shut it out. How do you use it responsibly, and how do you use it well? Because that's what you will be expected to do in a workplace. There is no workplace now that will be saying, oh, you can't use this to prepare to do this bit of work. If you can do it using AI and it's quicker, they will expect you to do it. Now, if we don't train the students to sort of do that well, we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
And of course, it's more complex than this, but just a simple analogy I think we should remind ourselves of is these debates happened when the calculator came in mathematics. People thought that calculators would destroy people's ability to do mathematical reasoning, but we found a way around. And I think about how my children learn in school. In some exams they're allowed to use a calculator, in others they're not. And that's quite common, isn't it, in GCSE maths, for example. And it's the same in the way we teach students now. So, we found a way to do that. I do think AI is actually philosophically different to a calculator. It does.
Yeah.
It thinks as well. So I don't want to suggest that it's a perfect analogy, but I guess that was really disruptive, though, the calculator in mathematics, in the same way as AI is really super disruptive at the moment. But I do think we're paid to think, aren't we, in universities, and to study and to learn, and we are working these things through. And that, as Nalin says, that responsible use, defining what that means, what's irresponsible, what's responsible, what's going to allow students to continue to learn and to use parts of their brain we know are really important, logical thinking, reasoning, critical capacities, working in teams and with other people, rather than just working on your own. We know that those are the sorts of things that your generation's going to really need to be successful in the workplace, but also you're going to need to know how to use AI responsibly. So it's those combinations. So yeah, it's not as simple as the calculator, but I think it is a good analogy for thinking through where you can and where you perhaps shouldn't be using this technology.
Okay, yeah, and I will say the calculator is definitely a lot less widespread in terms of the embeddedness of AI. Brilliant, thank you so much. So moving on. So as you know, the Student Union, they hold democratic votes, and the most recent one was actually a student vote to end the partnership with Tel-Aviv University, and this was supported by 94% of students who voted in. What are your opinions on that? And is the university going to implement the student vote?
Okay, let's take this in three parts.
Yeah.
First one is so there was a question about how do you tie social responsibility with working with partners that the student, for example, Tel Aviv University. And then the second part was, do we implement the vote? So can we take it in three parts? As a principle first, how do you tie social responsibility as a principle of working with this or working in defense or whatever? So I think, first of all, I have to acknowledge that the question is coming from a very good place.
Yeah.
What people are viewing on their televisions every night. There are people in our community that are grieving, that are angry, horrified. And that human response matters. And it deserves to be heard with seriousness and compassion. At the same time, when we talk about social responsibility in a university context as opposed to business, we have to understand they're not the same thing. We must start from a very particular foundation. A university's mission is built on academic freedom within the law. This is almost the single most important foundation value of a university. It's a principle that allows scholars to pursue evidence, ideas, wherever they lead, even when those ideas challenge governments, institutions, prevailing public or moral opinion. It is so important, it's enshrined in law. Without academic freedom, universities cannot fulfill their purpose. It's that foundational. So academic freedom is absolutely integral to social responsibility in a university context. It can't sit separate, and it can't override it in any way. That means that legally permissible academic partnerships cannot be treated as political endorsements, nor can we enter or leave partnerships on basis of geopolitical events or particular moral perspective. If we did that, we would very quickly begin to undermine the very freedom that is foundational to what universities are about. And this position is not unique to our university. This is the position of Universities UK, which represents every single university in the UK. It's the position of the Royal Society, which is the most prestigious learned society in the world. It's the position of British government as well, that academic freedom is absolutely central to a university, and we do not believe in academic boycotts. So that's a position that's held across the sector. It's not just us, it's everybody. Our partnerships exist because scholars are working on shared academic questions, not because we endorse the actions of a particular government or particular point of view. And we always ensure that the work that we do complies with all legal standards, any export controls, anything like that, any regulatory requirements, and any relevant research ethics standards that apply to that work. But beyond that, we do not say a particular moral position means you can't do that work or you can't partner with that particular university or an academic. We allow our academics have a right to collaborate or not to collaborate based on their conscience. So I think that's the sort of foundational value where we can't change, and social responsibility will not override that. None of this removes the sort of moral weight of what is happening in that region or any other conflict zones like Sudan. Social responsibility also means caring deeply about human suffering, creating safe spaces for protest and dialogue, supporting affected students and scholars in the area, and using research and scholarship to shed light on injustice and humanitarian crisis. And you may know of this, that we have our humanitarian scholarships, and we're looking at which support scholars from conflict zones. And we're looking to extend those in future. But also we have probably the first university to sort of agree to a new initiative, which is a partnership between the 3 public universities in Gaza and UK universities to support rebuilding of the higher educational structure in Gaza. Now that there is a ceasefire of sorts, there is a possibility of rebuilding the higher education structure, which has been destroyed. And we are the first ones to sort of say, yes, we want to be partners with that. That will mean committing some resource from us, but also a lot of work in terms of our academics supporting teaching there, or starting research partnerships there, or supporting actual rebuilding of infrastructure there. So social responsibility doesn't mean that we don't do anything about it. Yes, we will do something about it. So we have to hold on to this, is that we cannot end academic collaborations in response to popular or heartfelt views on a matter, even if these views are held by a majority. But in case of conflict, we can respond compassionately, transparently, and responsibly to the human tragedy that people are reacting to. I think when you say, why doesn't university, because of the vote of 94% of the students, end its partnership? We have to understand that we cannot make or end academic partnerships through referenda or popular votes. Think about this. If you had a vote tomorrow on, say, banning animal research, completely legitimate activity, would you say that university should listen to that and ban it? It just becomes, you create a precedent when you say a particular vote, a particular moral position means a university has to then undermine its academic freedom to take that position. But then you actually set a precedent, which means that you say, well, it could be many other positions that could, because it's a popular vote, that should be, those activities should be restrained by a university. So I think we have to be really careful that we don't undermine the very foundation of what university is about.
Brilliant. I think a lot of students, especially with this vote, are coming from a very deeply felt sort of sentiment from the community, not only students coming from an outside perspective, but a lot of students who themselves have family in Gaza, for example. And I guess there is a question of working with Tel Aviv University, which is arguably inseparable from the actual genocide going on in Gaza by Israel. And part of this activity includes making weapons and supporting soldiers and training of such, which is obviously going to come from resources and money. How does that work then with a research partnership that arguably puts money into that university, which thus then translates to putting money into these activities that are contributing to a genocide?
I would say that when you say you can't separate Tel Aviv University from the genocide that's happening, I think that is one perspective, and I don't necessarily agree with that perspective. And I was, by coincidence, in a UK meeting this morning with the British ambassador to Israel. And his words were that the biggest opposition to the Israeli government policy is coming from the universities.
Okay.
And he said, and there were, in fact, the reason he was talking to UK was to encourage us to develop relationships for those of us who don't have a relationship, and not to break off relationship, because he says that's the sort of thing that keeps those universities vital and operating well in that difficult environment. So I would say that's a one-sided perspective. There was a letter signed by all the vice chancellors or presidents of the Israeli universities criticizing the government and calling for, during when the food aid wasn't getting through and so on. So they are the ones who are sort of challenging the government. And I don't think we should be withdrawing from that. And like British government is saying, in fact, they're making funds available to create partnerships through British councils and so on. So I think it's a one-sided view. I can fully understand for those people who are grieving because they've got family in Gaza and so on. But I still come back to this, that we can respond with compassion to that. We can try and support rebuilding in Gaza. We can support scholars from Gaza. You know, we've already had 2 students and we worked hard to get them out of Gaza to sort of start their studies here. We support large number of Kara scholars, which are the academics at risk scholars, probably one of the largest, if not the largest in the country. So our social responsibility light comes in that aspect where we say, we don't want to undermine our academic freedom, but there are things that we can do. So we're not saying we can't do anything. Sorry, you know, you feel bad about this. We're saying, yes, we must do something about it. And we are trying to do something about it. As I said, we are the first university to have responded to say, yes, we want to be part of this partnership for rebuilding in Gaza. So it's not that we're doing nothing.
But just the level of what you're doing, it is in line with the values of academic freedom.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And just sort of finally, I guess for a lot of students, academic freedom is really just a concept that you don't hear about really until you come to university. And the idea that it is something that is rooted in sort of laws by the government as well, sort of keeps in line that the institution as a whole runs sort of in line with what the government is.
No, I think academic freedom goes beyond the government.
Beyond the government.
It actually stops any government interference
Okay.
in academic affairs.
Okay.
Basically, what it says is that academics have a right to pursue ideas, research in any area they like within the law, without any interference from government, from any pressure groups or anything like that.
Okay.
So it protects the academics. And that's what's so wonderful about a university, that universities, the name is all about this universality of ideas, and you have a community of scholars challenging and sort of, you know, developing new knowledge by challenge and debate. And by sort of saying the organization saying we take a particular moral position on something, you basically silence people who may not agree with you.
Okay.
So academic freedom is about taking a holistic approach to sort of having that diversity of views in our university and protecting that from any external influence.
Yeah. So finally, just sort of, whether you mentioned with Tel-Aviv University, you're saying that they themselves are actually sort of more opposed to this sort of actions by the Israeli government, and that they are working in these institutions to do so. Would this be something that the University of Manchester then is trying to also work with them to oppose these regimes?
Well, we as I said, we don't work in the political arena.
Okay, cool.
That's not our role.
Yeah.
What we do is academic work. So if we look at the sort of things we've been doing, and they've been largely just low-level funding for studentships, for our students to sort of work with academics there. They're largely in the health sector, some are in the environmental sector, that's it. That's the sort of level of work that happens with Tel Aviv University. And they're large, as I said, studentships. So if I as an academic had a student who wanted to work with an academic there was some specialism in Tel Aviv, there was an academic who could sort of supervise that, we would do that. But equally, I have a right not to participate in that, you know, and a student has a right to say, I don't want to be any part of that. Because people do these things through their moral conscience. It's not about sort of you're forced to sort of participate. No academics are forced to sort of take up these studentships.
Yeah.
It is completely up to you whether you sort of want to do it because there is an academic reason, and also you're free to exercise your moral conscience. I think what we cannot do is, and I when we had the debate in Senate, I was sort of describing this, that we're all entitled to do whatever we want to do because that's our moral conscience. You know, I can say I don't want to work in this area. I can boycott things, you know, myself. I can try and convince through discussions like this for others not to participate in something.
Yeah.
And I can challenge the government to take a sort of government position on this. and to introduce sort of sanctions or whatever. And they do. So certain countries, there are sanctions and we can't work with them. But what I can't do is to come up to you and say, my moral position's X, therefore you can't work in that area.
Okay.
That is clearly wrong.
Yeah.
You have a right to work in an area that is completely legitimate. And that's, I shouldn't be sort of saying my moral view supersedes your legal right to work in that area.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just to sort of wrap up this topic, finally just also want to now go, as you said, with the moral sort of views of people, it's not something that you can enforce onto other individuals. However, this doesn't negate the emotional impact that it has on a lot of students who are feeling this very deeply, whether that is Palestinian students, whether this is students who are genuinely affected by witnessing what we're seeing as a genocide happening. How are these students now being supported and being felt that they're being heard and being sort of listened to, despite sort of principles such as academic freedom coming in that prevent sort of the university taking moral action?
So we have to provide space for these students to speak, to protest, and to be heard.
Yeah.
We have to provide space to have that safe dialogue.
Yeah.
And we have to support them in any way we need to. So since the 7th of October 2 years ago, we've been meeting regularly with the Islamic Society and the JSOC, Jewish Society, to sort of hear from them what are the needs of their members. And early on, we were meeting every week during the early part of the conflict. And now we meet every month, and Sarah comes to that, and the student support team come to that. The Students' Union sabbatical members are there. Yeah, so, we try and collectively work together to see what support we need to provide for students who are clearly in a very difficult position.
Yeah, and just to open this up to the rest of the floor, just in case anyone had any comments that they wanted to make before I move on.
Don't think of anything to add to Nalin. I'd just say that one of the expression of that vote, I think, that happened is it's really important that we provide the space. That in itself, I think, is really important, that the Students' Union performs its most valuable function, I think, to the wider student experience when it does have those places where these really difficult discussions can happen. And so I think that's a really valuable thing in terms of what you were asking, how can students express what they feel on this issue. I think by having that vote, that's exactly the type of example. I think having, through our student societies, through discussions, panel discussions, debates, etc., that we've hosted in the university, and making sure we can hear a wide range of perspectives, and it's really clear what students are saying on this, and so providing that structure for these really difficult conversations is one of the most valuable things a university can do. That, and to do that and to try and model how we do that in an inclusive way. That I think is the really difficult thing that we're all grappling with. We want, as a university, to be different to what the algorithms might be telling us on social media, or what people shouting at each other on our television screens might be saying, with quite extreme views on things. And I think with a university, what we want to do is bring together people in these inclusive dialogues. It's not easy to do that, but we always come back to that if we can't do it as a university, then which part of society can? So very difficult, but we will keep endeavouring to do that, because I think that's a university at its best, to have these difficult conversations in this really inclusive way.
I think if we can give reassurance that we are listening, not performatively, not defensively, we're genuinely listening, even when we are constrained by the foundational values of a university. It doesn't mean we're not doing anything.
Okay.
And there's a conversation to be had all the time. We will continue talking, we will continue learning, we will continue to support our students in the best way we can. And if we are not supporting the students, you please tell us, and we will try our best to do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so there's a really pressing question that I've got coming up now. Can the university give students some of their old electronics, please?
Yeah, I suppose the short answer is unfortunately not, but the slightly longer answer is we have arrangements in place to reuse our electrical equipment. So first of all, we'll take it back and we'll see if we can reuse it internally. And if we can't, then we have a relationship with a third party who will take that equipment, sort of wipe it, refurbish it, and then either resell it or donate it. And then if it can't be reused, then they'll strip it down, take all the elements out, reuse them elsewhere, and then dispose of the other parts. And I think there are some kind of key reasons why we can't provide it back to students, mainly around health and safety, and also our duty of care to students. So we can't, give faulty equipment that will then have an issue with their own safety, and then also around sort of data confidentiality and ownership as well. So yeah, unfortunately not. But then we do give around 100 pieces of IT equipment away every year to local organisations. So whether that's sort of laptops or PC equipment.
Brilliant. Thank
The
you.
library, though, I should add in, Julie, if I may, yeah, they do loans of laptops through a scheme we have in the library, and tablets, actually. So if a student, if their machine breaks or something, I'd really encourage them to get in contact with the library. That's one way. And if a student's in hardship, we have hardship funds, and that's what they're there for. So please, any student that's experiencing hardship as well, and that's getting in the way of them buying the right equipment to support them in the studies, they need to get in touch with us, and we'll really endeavour to support our students through that fund. It's a really generous fund, and we want as many students as possible to know about that and to be using that.
Thank you. Yeah, I myself have used those laptops in the library. Very useful when your laptop randomly breaks when you're trying to write a really important essay. Okay, so I think when we're talking about sort of sustainability, it's really hard to ignore the sort of plan on implementing carbon emissions. Zero direct carbon emissions. We don't want more carbon emissions. So how is the university planning on implementing zero direct carbon emissions by 2038, keeping in mind all of these other factors that feed into it, such as AI, sustainability initiatives, all of these sort of things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's referring to our target that we've committed to reduce our direct emissions to zero by 2038. So that target was actually created by our scientists in the Tyndall Centre and for Manchester, the city region as well. So we're part of a bigger kind of movement towards reducing our carbon emissions. So how are we doing it? We have a plan in place, and it's identified sort of 3 key ways. And first, I should say what our direct emissions actually mean. So that is the power and the heat that we use in our buildings. So electricity that we purchase, and then also the gas that we use to heat them and provide hot water. So our plan, identifies sort of 3 key areas that we need to focus on. One is around the electricity that we purchase. So we've actually started buying electricity from a brand new solar farm that through something called a corporate power purchase agreement. So basically that's where we work with a clean energy provider and we've built a brand new solar farm, and then we agree to purchase that electricity at fixed price over the next 10 years. So the really interesting thing about that is that we've created this kind of new source of renewable energy that's going into the grid, rather than us just buying some of that renewable energy that was already there. So that's going to cover around 65% of our electricity demand, which is enough to power around 22,000 houses. So it's huge, covers 70 football pitches, and that's going to reduce our emissions by about a quarter. So the second way that we're doing it is through sort of energy efficiency measures. So we have a whole sort of pipeline of projects around lighting, LED lighting, around optimizing our sort of heating and ventilation and air conditioning, putting in heating controls, sensors, etc. And then also looking at buildings and the building fabric, so improving insulation, improving sort of roofing and windows, so we can keep the energy that we do use within the building. And actually the building that we're in at the moment, the Booth Street East building, or Flexible Learning Centre, is one of our first buildings where we've done sort of this whole building approach. So we've improved the fabric, we've changed a lot of the technology within the building, and then we've also taken out the gas heating, and it's powered by air source heat pumps. So that kind of brings us on to the third way that we're doing. We need to decarbonise our heat, which essentially means we need to get off the gas, basically. So this will be sort of our next big step change, but it's big and it's complex. We have these 3 big heat networks, which basically provide the heating and hot water to most of the buildings on campus, and that is currently powered by gas. So we now need to find a renewable source of that energy in order to reduce those emissions. So we've had a high-level feasibility study done to look at the technology, or the sort of collection of technologies that we might need to use in order to do this. So things like air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, sewer source heat pumps, and there's essentially taking the heat from either the water in the ground or the heat from the sewers, and then using it to heat the water. And then also sort of deep geothermal, so drilling really far down into the ground to get that hot water. So there's lots of different ways we can do it, and we need to look into this in a bit more detail to determine what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and that's going to be part of our emerging infrastructure strategy that's being developed at the moment.
Brilliant.
I think there are 2 bits to this that you need to consider when you're looking at, I mean, we're very big, we're very old,
Yes.
so we've got a lot of old buildings, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
And you've got a Stopford building as well. That'd be some help.
Stopford building was new when I started as an undergraduate. That's how old I am. So then there is the cost, and there's also the sort of known unknowns. Where does the technology take us in 10 years? Will the technology be so different that, you know, if we spend a lot of money now, actually, if we had waited 10 years, the technology would have been a lot cheaper and so on. So there is those sort of things to sort of think about. But there are sort of basically no harm options, in the sense that, you know, with doing an insulation on a building is a no harm option. You want to, even if you had all renewable energy, you still want to reduce your cost by just, you don't want to lose the heat from a building unnecessarily. The solar farm is actually no harm option. We have to buy electricity from somewhere. If we buy it from this particular source, it allows them to build one of the biggest solar farms in Europe and provide us with renewable energy. And then the really exciting stuff will come, because we'll have that residue of gas sort of emissions left with us, is how you sort of get rid of those. And that's where the exciting sort of solutions come in. But I think we can do it. I think we will be one of the few organizations in the city that's got the capacity to hit our true zero. The city has got a net zero target. We've got a true zero target by 2038. So we are much more ambitious than the rest of the city.
Could you explain the difference between those two?
So net zero means you're going to offset some of these things by, you know, various offsetting measures, planting forests and whatever you think, you know, in terms of, so you won't reduce everything. We think we can just get to true zero by actually doing what we do on the campus. And we're trying to sort of look at innovative ways of financing this and all of those sort of things, so you don't leave a big burden on the university. So the PPA is a great example. By continually buying from a particular source, it allowed them the funding to actually build a solar farm. Could we do the same for our gas replacement? Could we do it on the same basis? So we're not putting out, you know, £500 million on something that we then are paying back the loan on for so many years, which reduces the money available that we can invest in the university. So we would need to think about not just the technical solutions to this, but also the financial solutions to this.
And then, sorry, just to add the behavioural solutions as well. So we've got that alongside it. So encouraging people to, switch off equipment when it's not in use. We've got our Sustainable Labs programme. So how can we use our labs more efficiently, called LEAF. And then getting people involved in that, so we all actually have a role to play in reducing the amount of energy that we do.
And would you say part of that is also encouraging sort of sustainable use of AI or responsible use of AI to feed into that?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a really important part. So we're not just using it for frivolous reasons. It's for, it's targeted, and it's to support and assist what we're trying to do more broadly across teaching and learning and research.
Brilliant. Yeah. And when you said that, so is it a question of, do we invest in the technologies now, or will they be cheaper in 10 years? But then there is also the question that, isn't this something that is always going to be an issue, because we are constantly progressing, and shouldn't we put in measures now so that we don't?
And that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because there's a more pressing question in that while you're waiting those 10 years, you're still emitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's going to hang around for several hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't afford to wait too long.
Yes.
But there is a balance. So even if I go back 5 years, when I first took on this role and started looking at this, what we didn't have, we had the sort of air pumps that we've got in this place, which basically heat up at a very low level. And the sort of air source heat pumps that Julian has in his house, they heat up at very low level. So what you need to do is you need to have the building really well insulated.
Yes.
So they're not like traditional heating systems which pump out your radiators at about 60 degrees. These are at something like 30 or 40 degrees at the most. So, but we've seen within this 5 years, you can now get air source heat pumps that will put out water at 80 degrees. So the technology has changed so much that means that we should be able to do what we want to do without having to do the big sort of fabric upgrade to the all our buildings. We would do them in time anyway, because it's good to have buildings upgrade, but we can do that part of our long-term maintenance and so on.
Big barrier, wasn't it, Nalin,
Yeah.
before? Because of the state of where technology was just 5 years ago, we thought that to be able to electrify the heating of our hot water, essentially the water that runs through our radiators, that's our biggest challenge in a cold country. To do that, you would have to change the fabric of the building first, and which is extremely disruptive to the student experience and the research experience, and very expensive. Yeah. What we've realised now, it's a bit like what Nalin said I've done with my own home. I didn't have to rip out any pipes. It was all the existing radiators and pipework that was previously heated with gas is now heated through electric instead. So that huge cost that would have been for my home, or imagine that for a university this size, it's unbelievable cost. We don't have to do that first. We'd still want to insulate the buildings when we can through long-term maintenance, but we can, in the meantime, electrify that heat now in a more confident way with some of those older buildings that we've got, where we would have worried if the temperature in the radiators could have got hot enough essentially without that, whereas that technology's changed. So that's a really exciting place to be, and it's a good example of us not, it wasn't deliberate, we're going to wait 5 years, but that's what's happened in those 5 years, is we're more confident now, and the feasibility work that Julia's talked about gives us these options now, which I think we can start to consider, both from a scientific point of view, technologically, can they provide the solutions, but also then financially, how you can find new ways to fund this, like we've done with our solar farm, which, as we said, is the second biggest in the UK. Julian and I were there about 6 weeks ago. It is awesome, just to go there. I can't believe.
Have a look
I didn't have many expectations. We went down the day before. We got there in the morning, and we were shown around, and it just kept going on and on and on. And only Tesco have a bigger solar farm in the whole of the UK than the university. So and as Julie said earlier, I think that's not just helping us as a university, it's helping our UK energy transition to net zero. So the UK has a policy to be net zero by 2050. The only way as a country we can get out of our environmental crisis is to put more renewable power into our grid. So we're not just helping ourselves, we're also helping the country and the world, by these sorts of projects. And it's a great example. We talk a lot about using our purchasing power for good. How can we use procurement, our spending decisions, whether it's the tablet I buy, the table we're sat around, how when we buy some stuff in the university. So in those spending decisions, how can we be a force for good? And I think the solar farm is the best example. I've worked here for 24 years now. It's our single biggest reduction in emissions ever.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, our single most important example of using our spending power for good.
Cool.
Can I just add to that? The solar farm is not just providing energy for us. It's going to provide an outdoor laboratory for our students.
Brilliant.
And it's also going to result in a net increase in biodiversity in that field. So the whole solar farm has been designed to sort of support beyond just providing us with power.
Yes.
It's going to provide a laboratory, outdoor field laboratory for our students. So our students in FSC will be using that facility as a laboratory.
It was a surprising output as well, wasn't it? I think you know what I'm going to say now, Judy, but when we went there, we didn't realise a part of that net gain in biodiversity, they had a few 100,000 bees that we were told, and we were given honey that was made on the solar farm from those bees as well, which we brought back to campus as well. So that was an unexpected benefit of a solar farm. I never would have associated honey with a solar farm.
But here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have solar farm honey.
Brilliant. In the interest of time, so I've got two more things that I just want to get to. First of all, Sarah, I want to come back to what you were talking about when you were discussing like your EDI ventures. How do you actually measure that, whether these initiatives are genuinely improving the outcomes and not just something that is, reducing it on the outside? So it's not just for the interest of visibility.
Yeah, so it's about, well, I think it's quite easy with EDI because it is a data-driven discipline. Like you can see the impact of your efforts in numbers primarily, and then like of course beneath those numbers sit experiences. So we measure and track both. I was speaking earlier about leadership representation. Ultimately, that is the big measure in EDI. It's representation. So that's, which students come to university here, what's the diversity of our student body, and what's the retention of students from, different identities. And it's the same set of measures really with colleagues, who kind of comes to work here, who's at the different levels of the organisation, and are we retaining those colleagues? And that data is so interesting because it kind of tells a story about experiences. So, what you will often see is kind of higher dropout rates of students from traditionally marginalised groups through the course of degrees. And so that data is then giving you a clue about where you need to go and look at experience. So yeah, in a way, it's kind of a simple answer, but it's very easy because it's there in the numbers.
Yeah.
And, I would really encourage people to just go and look at our Equality Information Report.
Yeah.
Now, that is quite a boring title. But if the data in it and the richness of it, if you look at it, you can kind of see our whole student experience mapped out there in numbers. And, you can see a kind of what's happening for particular groups. And then I think that under that, it is really important to track experience and engagement and lived experience. So, primarily, I think that the biggest way we do that is through things like student engagement surveys and colleague engagement surveys. And if you segment that data by kind of different identities, you can really see the disparity in experience play out.
Yeah.
So, our primary goals are about increasing representation. And then under that, we want to see the disparities in experience kind of close. And then I would say the final way that you can really see impact is through our awarding gaps. And in the case of colleagues, our pay gaps.
Yes.
And again, we have goals to continuously kind of narrow those gaps. So yeah, I think it is, if you go and look for it, it's very easy to see impact. I've only been in this role a year, And, you know, something I would observe is that I do think we need to get a lot better about really kind of getting out to our community and telling the story of you know, what these changes that we're seeing in data as a result of the work that we're doing. I also think those are the big measures. I do think that we need to get better at really tracking the impact of specific initiatives. And you know, like we do loads of stuff and then we see our numbers improve, and they are improving. But I think we need to get a lot more discerning about which stuff is actually improving those numbers. So a big focus of, you know, the EDI framework that will be implemented over the life cycle of Manchester 2035 is to be a lot more focused on what really has impact and do more of that and do less of the things that aren't actually driving improvement.
Thank you so much. Finally, I think just to now wrap this up, because I think we're getting to time, if I could just ask all of you in one sentence, how can students get involved? We've discussed a lot of different things. Obviously, this covers a lot of different things. But if you had one sentence to say to students, how can you get involved in any of these initiatives? How can you, you know, try and become a more socially responsible student? How can you do any of these things? So I'm just going to go around. I'll start here.
Okay, I think they need to go to where you go every day, to the Students' Union. It's student-led, isn't it? I think we can do lots of things as a university, but yeah, go to your Students' Union, get involved in societies and campaigns, whatever that might be. That'd be a great starting point.
Thank you.
Yes, similar, I guess. It's decide what you're passionate about changing, and then take that direction and find out what society is available, maybe what volunteering is available, what Stellify programs are available, but do something that you're really interested in.
Cool, thank you.
So every single thing we do in EDI, we consult with students, and it's informed by the student voice. And so I would say sign up. Sign up, come along and have your voice heard within our EDI work.
Brilliant, Nalin.
I want to get to a point where a student doesn't have to make a choice, that it's part of their course, that they are actually benefiting the wider society. And that's where the partner engaged learning comes in. That it becomes just second nature. The idea that when we ask people to sort of, what can they do? It often, you know, students who come from, who need to work after finishing university, they go to do a part-time job and so on, or have caring responsibilities. They often sort of miss out on those opportunities.
Yes, you want it embedded.
And so I want it embedded. So it's something we have to do to enable the students to be able to do that. So I think I'm looking at us rather than as what can the student do. You've heard some very nice, you know, good examples of what students can do, but we have to do more. To make it possible for students to be able to participate.
Yeah, and I think that's really indicative of all of these things. A lot of what students need to be able to do is only going to be helped by the university making it a centralised thing. But yeah, this has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you everyone for sitting here and talking with, I don't know how long it's been now, but
Gone by in a flash.
yeah, cool.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
No worries.